you've done this for over 30 years. You're very familiar. You've been in law enforcement in D.C. specifically for over 30 years. So you know how the city runs. You know how the federal agencies respond to protests. This is not the first violent protest.
Not at all.
There have been many.
I've done many national special security events, and this was handled differently. No, the intelligence, no jib, no coordination, no discussion in advance. It's almost like they wanted it to be watered down, the intelligence to be watered down for some reason. I talked about a little bit in the book that maybe they were concerned for the Trump invoking the Insurrection Act, and they're worried about that. But I've had people, there's those other, thoughts out there. But luckily we still have people investigating this because I still think there's puzzle pieces missing. Someone's going to find out what's really behind all this because it wasn't right the way the intelligence was handled and the way out we're set up on the Hill.
Big picture, just to restate, you've seen many things like this, and as you just said, this was very different. This was handled very differently. By whom?
By the intelligence. I'd say one, by the intelligence agency, two, by the military. So the reason why I say the military, think of this. By federal law, Congress passed a law that requires me to go to the Sergeant Arms Capitol Police Board in advance of an event and to request federal resources such as the National Guard. So Congress passed a law. It's 2 U.S. Code 1970. Look it up. Just make sure you look it up before December 22 when they changed it. So what was in effect on the 6th, that requires me to go and get approval for bringing in National Guard or federal assistance in advance. I have to go to the Capitol Police Board and get approval from congressional leadership in advance, like I did on January 3rd. I'm denied twice because of optics and because the intelligence didn't support it. So think about that.
Let me ask you the question, who made that decision? Who denied you?
I was denied by Paul Irving, House Sergeant Arms, and also Mike Stenger, Senate Sergeant Arms.
And who do they work for?
It would have been working for Pelosi on the House side. That Pelosi was the number one boss, and then McConnell on the Senate side.
Ah. So effectively, Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi shut down your request.
My request was shut down, one, because of optics, which is interesting. You're going to hear that term come up a couple more times. Optics, or the look of the National Guard on the Hill. But yeah, in the Capitol Police Board, I mean, it's unbelievable that I'm the only chief of police in the United States that has a law preventing me, not just regulations, rules that say I got to go and get approval to bring in the National Guard, a law. So that's crazy that Congress is going to pass a law that controls what I can do to protect the Capitol, and even in emergencies. So think of this. Even while we're under attack, I have to go to those same two people to request the National Guard to be brought in. I have 340 National Guard that have been activated. At least 150 to 180 of those are in the city, many of them within eyesight of the Capitol, okay? We got to come under attack at 12:53. 12:55, I called the Washington, D.C. Police Department. I talked to their Assistant Chief, Jeff Carroll. Thank God I had talked to him at 10:59 in the morning and asked him if he could possibly put some additional resources on Constitution Avenue. And he had some CDU platoons up there. Called him, said, hey, please send those in right away, because we knew as soon as they came up to their west front, they started attacking, it was going to be bad. 12:58, I make my first call to the Sergeant Arms, asking, saying, hey, it's bad, we need assistance, I need a declaration of emergency, I need to bring in the military immediately and federal resources. I'm told by Paul Irving, quote, I'm going to run it up the chain, I'll get back to you.
The chain is Pelosi.
The chain his chain would be up to Nancy Pelosi. He didn't have to do that, but he wouldn't give me authorization. The law says in emergency he can grant me authorization, but he didn't. He said he'd run up the chain. My next call was over to Mike Stenger. He's now the chairman of the Capitol Police Board. Told him the same thing. We're getting our asses handed to us on the west front. I need federal resources. He said, what did Paul tell you? I said, he's run up the chain. He goes, let's wait to hear what we hear from Paul. Sorry. So for the next 71 minutes, I make 32 calls. I'm in the command center. I'm calling my partner agencies. And by law, one of the first people to offer assistance was the United States Secret Service. And by law, I shouldn't have requested their assistance. I shouldn't be until I had approval. But I'm looking at my men and women having their asses handed to them. And my first thought was, fuck it, I will take whatever discipline there is. Send me whatever you got. Now, that's the one text Secret Service turned over. You know how they lost all their texts?
Yes.
It's the text between their Chief Sullivan and myself. Thank God for him.
But I don't. You make this call immediately to the House Sergeant Arms, who reports Mr. Irving, who reports to Nancy Pelosi. He says, "I'll call Pelosi."
He says, "I'm gonna run it up the chain."
Run it up the chain, but that is the chain.
No, I hear you. I got you. I want to tell you exactly what he said.
What happens then? Does he get back to you?
So for the next 71 minutes, I make the 32 calls to a number of agencies. 11 of those calls are follow-up calls. And look in the Senate combined report from 2001. They have a great infographic of the call after call after call after call. 11 times I call in the next 71 minutes going, where are we on the approval? Where are we on the approval? Because any minute now, any minute, I'm going to get any minute. Finally at 2:09, 71 minutes later, 2:09, I'm finally given approval. Think about that. 71 minutes later, I immediately call Mike Stinger, say we've got approval. I was so pissed off, I made sure that the watch commander, I'm in the command center, I yelled to John Wisham, the lieutenant, that's my watch commander. I said, John, mark the time as 2:10. I finally got approval for the National Guard. I was that mad.
So what is I just want to pause on this for a minute. That's like, it's almost unbelievable. So this is an event that Pelosi herself has likened to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, the worst thing that's ever happened on American soil. And she's in charge of allowing the National Guard to come in and respond, but she doesn't for 71 minutes. What is that?
I can't fathom why. I mean, they had to have known what was going on. I was telling them how bad it was.
Well, it was on TV.
It was on TV. It was right outside of Mike Stinger's office. And they had a meeting in his office saying, hey, where's the National Guard? And they're like, oh, we're trying to make... The fighting is going on right outside his office. And I'm still getting delayed.
This is an unbelievable story.
Oh, it is. Now get a kick out of this.
Has anyone ever explained this?
It's verbatim in my book. I have details. The whole chapter on January 6th is almost 100 pages long.
But I don't understand. So we're only 10 minutes into this, and you've told me two things. One, the other federal agencies withheld critical information from you in charge of security at the Capitol before January 6th. And once it started and things got out of control, for 71 minutes, Pelosi refused to allow you to bring in the National Guard. So those are two of the biggest questions from January 6th. And my question is, why don't we have answers to why that happened?
It doesn't seem like people really want to get to the bottom of it. It really doesn't. And it just gets worse. It gets worse from there.
I'm sorry to step on your story. It's shocking.
It is. It is shocking to think that we should be a coordinated security apparatus. There's regulations. There's procedures for defense support for civil authorities. I've taught it for the military. They don't realize they brought me in to ask me to actually teach this for foreign governments coming to visit. There's a process for when law enforcement needs help and we dial 911. It's to the military. And that failed. That failed miserably because of the law Congress passed and the denial I was receiving.
Well, it sounds like it was prevented. So Paul Irving, the guy who had, you're saying, the statutory authority to give that okay, has he ever explained why he didn't?
Oh, they had him and he testified at the Senate hearing in 2001.
2021?
I'm sorry, 2021. My apologies. Thank you for
problem.
catching. A couple of times he disagreed with my recollection. I can tell you my phone records, I turned them over immediately. I fought to testify. They didn't even want me to testify in the Senate hearing. I fought to testify.
Why wouldn't they? Oh, there's so much here. Who didn't want you to testify?
So when
You're the chief of Capitol Police on January 6th. I mean,
you and me are on lockstep with this, and my story hasn't changed in 2.5 years. So when they first put out the notice, and they were talking about having the hearing, it was only for current employees that were still in place. No one that was no longer in place in their position in security. So think about that. Initially, when they put out the request to have they were talking about having the hearing, it would have excluded Paul Irving, would have excluded Mike Stinger, and it would have excluded me. Only 3 people. The 3 people at the top of the security apparatus.
So the Democrats, I think.
Well, it was joint. It was a combined joint.
Sorry.
I hear you.
I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Of course. Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. The internet is crowded with interesting things that don't really matter. On TCN, we attempt to bring you interesting things that actually do matter, and a lot of them. Interviews, long form and short, videos, documentaries. You can find all of it on tuckercarlson.com, and we hope you will.